Buckingham Palace, February 1st, 2026. Behind the golden doors of Britain's most ceremonial space, a conversation occurs that will quietly reshape the future of the monarchy itself. It is not a crisis meeting. It is not a moment of institutional panic. It is something far more deliberate, a strategic recalibration of power and symbol conducted with the precision that only centuries of institutional practice can produce. Presiding over this gathering is Princess Anne, the Princess Royal, a woman whose reputation for uncompromising duty and institutional loyalty has made her the moral compass of the House of Windsor for more than 5 decades. With King Charles managing declining health and Queen Camilla increasingly withdrawn from public responsibilities, Anne has assumed a role that transcends her official title. She has become, in effect, the guardian of institutional continuity during a period of profound transition. The agenda appears straightforward: streamline the ceremonial and public duties being transferred to Prince William and Catherine as the monarchy repositions itself for succession. But within this procedural framework lies a moment that will prove far more consequential than any administrative restructuring. With the assembled advisors, senior officials, private secretaries, constitutional experts, and trusted confidants, Anne makes a declaration that stops conversation entirely. It is time Catherine had a crown of her own. The statement is delivered not as a question or a suggestion, but as an institutional observation. Anne continues with measured precision. She has carried more than her share of this institution's weight. She has represented the crown in every significant capacity. She has rebuilt public trust through quiet service, and she has done all of this while wearing borrowed symbols. It is not merely deserved, Anne concludes, it is overdue. The silence that follows is not the silence of disagreement, it is the silence of recognition, the acknowledgement that something obvious has finally been named aloud by someone with sufficient authority that denial is no longer possible. For more than a decade, Catherine has operated as the functional moral center of the monarchy without the symbolic recognition that typically accompanies such a role. She has attended state visits. She has delivered addresses at international forums. She has led charitable initiatives that have reshaped how the institution engages with global issues. She has shouldered public duties that would normally distribute across multiple senior figures. And she has done all of this while wearing tiaras borrowed from palace vaults, the Cartier halo tiara from her wedding, the lover's knot tiara once favored by Diana, the lotus flower tiara from the royal collection. Never her own, never commissioned specifically to represent her, never a personal symbol of her institutional role. This absence has become increasingly conspicuous as Catherine's actual influence has grown. The public sees her at diplomatic summits. The press photographs her at Commonwealth forums. The nation recognizes her as the face of modern royal service, yet within the formal hierarchy, she remains technically a consort, important, valued, but symbolically secondary. Anne's proposal to commission a personal crown for Catherine is not, therefore, a gift. It is a recognition of reality. It is an institutional acknowledgement of a transition that has already occurred in practice and merely requires formal symbolization. The crown's design, should such a commission proceed, would represent something unprecedented in recent British royal history. Not a crown designed to project imperial dominance or ceremonial grandeur, but rather a crown designed to reflect lived values. Sustainability, service, grace, beneath pressure. According to preliminary discussions within palace circles, the proposed design would incorporate platinum rather than gold, a metal lighter in weight, stronger in structure, and more sustainable in sourcing. The gemstones would include sapphires from Queen Mary's personal collection, representing continuity of lineage and institutional memory, a central ruby of exceptional quality, chosen to symbolize the bloodline of service rather than dominance. Cornish diamonds honoring local heritage and craftspeople. South Sea pearls reflecting purity and emotional wisdom. The design would also incorporate symbolic motifs specifically chosen to reflect Catherine's own values and work. Tudor roses intertwined with lotus blossoms, representing the balance between tradition and inner peace. Olive leaf filigree symbolizing her documented work in peace-building and international mediation. Laurel garlands representing achievement through compassion rather than conquest. Most notably, the crown would feature detachable coronet arches, a design feature not employed since the Victorian era. This would allow the piece to be transformed from its full ceremonial form into a smaller, more portable version suitable for community visits, charity events, and occasions where the symbol is more important than the spectacle. Catherine herself, according to palace sources, requested this particular design element. She envisioned a crown that could travel with her work, that could be present in hospitals and schools and community centers, not merely locked in ceremonial display. A working crown for a working queen. The commission would be entrusted to Gerard and Company, the legendary crown jewelers of the British royal family since 1735. Their master artisans have crafted ceremonial pieces for monarchs from George III through Queen Elizabeth II. Now they face a fundamentally different challenge, designing a crown not for a reigning monarch by succession, but for a woman who has become the emotional epicenter of the institution through demonstrated service rather than inherited position. In the weeks following the Buckingham Palace meeting, preliminary design consultations begin quietly. Art historians are consulted, symbolic theologians are engaged, environmental consultants review sourcing options for all materials. The vision that emerges is revolutionary in its restraint. Where past royal crowns embodied conquest or dominion or ceremonial authority, this crown is being deliberately designed around who Catherine is rather than what position she holds. The result is a piece that speaks of quiet strength rather than ostentatious power, of earned stature rather than birthright assumption, of a monarchy that has evolved to recognize that true authority derives from consistent service rather than ceremonial tradition alone. The estimated value of the completed crown, based on preliminary material and design complexity, is projected at approximately £4.2 million sterling. This makes it the third most valuable personal crown in British royal history, behind only the Queen Mother's ceremonial crown and Queen Elizabeth II's state crown. Yet this represents not lavish indulgence, but rather fair market valuation of materials and exceptional craftsmanship. More significantly, the royal household has committed to complete transparency regarding the crown's creation. All gemstone sourcing will be publicly documented, manufacturing costs will be disclosed, the design process itself will be subject to public scrutiny as part of Catherine and William's broader modernization initiative promoting institutional transparency and accountability. If this crown represents a new monarchy, a palace official states, then it must begin with integrity. The public response to reports of the proposed crown has been unexpectedly fervent. Within days of the story breaking through unofficial channels, hashtags like Catherine Crown, New Queen Spirit, and Windsor Future begin trending across social media platforms throughout the United Kingdom and Commonwealth nations. Polling conducted by major research organizations shows that over 80% of British respondents support Catherine receiving a personal crown, citing her dignity, her demonstrated commitment to public service, and her modernization of royal practice as defining reasons for their support. Royal commentators describe the moment as transformative. One prominent BBC correspondent notes, "This is not truly about jewelry, this is about institutional justice. Catherine has carried the weight of the crown without wearing its symbol. That contradiction is finally being addressed." But the proposal is not universally embraced within palace circles. Queen Camilla, learning of Anne's suggestion and the preliminary design consultations, responds with immediate and unambiguous resistance. According to sources close to Clarence House, Camilla objects strongly to the commission, stating explicitly, "The Queen Consort crown already exists. I am still the Queen. There will be no additional coronation. There will be no suggestion that Catherine represents the full authority of the monarchy." Where King Charles had appeared amenable to transferring significant ceremonial responsibilities to William and Catherine, Camilla positions herself as defender of traditional hierarchy. She resists not merely the crown itself, but the implied elevation that such a symbol would represent. In her view, to permit Catherine a personal crown would be to concede symbolic ground that she has spent decades establishing and consolidating. The dynamic that emerges is not openly confrontational, but rather characterized by what palace observers describe as passive institutional resistance. Where once joint invitations bore the seal of their majesties, they increasingly emanate solely from Kensington Palace. Camilla declines certain high-profile engagements. She resists formal language that would recognize Catherine as the monarchy's principal public steward. One palace insider describes the tension bluntly. To Camilla, William may be the king in waiting, but in her eyes she remains the reigning queen. That conflict is now on full display. Yet despite this resistance, the momentum behind Catherine's crown continues to build. Princess Anne, having staked her considerable institutional authority behind the initiative, does not retreat. She continues to champion Catherine's ascension not as a political maneuver but as institutional necessity. In private meetings with King Charles, she articulates the argument with characteristic clarity. The monarchy's future depends on public trust. Catherine has earned that trust through consistent service. Symbolic recognition of that reality is not charity, it is institutional self-preservation. Charles, already struggling with health challenges that require him to delegate increasing responsibilities, appears persuaded by Anne's reasoning. He signals his support for the Crown Commission while simultaneously managing the political fallout from Camilla's resistance. The delicate balance he attempts to maintain, honoring both his wife's concerns and his sister's institutional vision, reflects the profound complexity of royal transition in real time. By late February, the design process has advanced significantly. Initial sketches circulate within restricted palace circles. Preliminary material samples arrive from suppliers in Cornwall and international gem dealers. The crown begins to move from concept to tangible reality, each design element chosen with deliberate intention to reflect Catherine's values and the monarchy's evolving self-understanding. Within the gilded corridors of palace administration, the Crown Commission triggers a cascade of institutional reconfigurations that ripple far beyond design consultations and material sourcing. The first visible shift manifests in what observant royal watchers term a gentle but deliberate repositioning of Catherine's public profile. Where previously she had operated within carefully prescribed protocols, appearing alongside the king and queen at certain state occasions, maintaining appropriate deference in hierarchical settings, her role now begins to subtly expand. She chairs meetings that historically would have required the queen consort's participation. She receives diplomatic correspondence addressed to Her Royal Highness, with language that suggests recognition of elevated institutional standing. She is photographed in settings that conventionally would have been reserved for reigning queens or crown princesses. None of these shifts constitute dramatic rupture or formal announcement. There is no proclamation from the palace declaring expanded authority. Instead, there is simply a gradual recalibration of protocol, a quiet repositioning that the institution's machinery executes with practiced efficiency. Princess Anne, observing this institutional evolution from her position of considerable influence, ensures that Catherine understands the significance of what is transpiring. In a private conversation at Windsor Castle, a meeting arranged with deliberate discretion, Anne reportedly tells Catherine directly, "You are not waiting for a crown to be queen, you are simply waiting for the symbol to catch up with the reality." Catherine's response, according to those briefed on the exchange, reflects her characteristic restraint. "I have never sought elevation. I have only ever attempted to serve with integrity." To which Anne replies, "Precisely, which is why you deserve the crown more than anyone I have known in my lifetime." The conversation is brief, but carries implications that extend far beyond the personal. It represents an explicit institutional endorsement from the most respected royal voice of her generation. It signals that Catherine's ascension is not merely personal preference or political maneuvering, but rather institutional consensus among the Crown's most authoritative figures. As word of the Crown Commission spreads through official channels and informal networks, the reaction among Commonwealth leaders proves unexpectedly significant. Prime ministers from Canada, Australia, and New Zealand privately communicate to palace officials that they view Catherine's elevation favorably. The sentiment, according to diplomatic sources, reflects recognition that Catherine has become the face of the modern Commonwealth, a figure who bridges traditional institutional authority with contemporary values around accessibility, environmental stewardship, and social responsibility. One particularly telling moment occurs during a Commonwealth Youth Forum held in Toronto in late February. When Catherine delivers an address on generational leadership and institutional adaptation, the applause reportedly lasts longer than any royal speech in over a decade. The standing ovation is not merely polite recognition. It represents genuine public acknowledgement of her role as the monarchy's moral anchor in an era demanding institutional relevance. The international media, picking up on these signals, begins framing Catherine's potential crown not as a ceremonial honor, but as institutional recognition of genuine leadership. Headlines in major publications speak of the crown catching up to the Queen and a new era of earned authority. The narrative that emerges is fundamentally different from traditional accounts of royal succession. This is not about inherited power transferring between generations. This is about institutional recognition of demonstrated competence and public trust. Back in London, the implications of this international positioning become increasingly apparent to palace strategists. Catherine is not merely becoming more prominent within British institutional structures. She is being repositioned globally as the face of British soft power and institutional modernization. The crown, when it emerges, will therefore carry implications that extend well beyond ceremonial boundaries. Meanwhile, Queen Camilla's resistance to the Crown Commission continues to manifest in ways that gradually undermine her own institutional position. Where she attempts to assert traditional authority, Catherine's demonstrated competence becomes increasingly apparent by contrast. Where Camilla resists symbolic elevation for Catherine, public opinion interprets the resistance as petty institutional territoriality rather than principled defense of tradition. By early March, palace observers note a subtle but significant shift in Camilla's public behavior. She begins attending fewer high-profile engagements. She declines certain invitations that would place her alongside Catherine in visible settings. She withdraws, in effect, from direct competition for institutional prominence. Whether this represents genuine change of heart or simply strategic retreat from an untenable position remains subject to speculation. But the effect is unmistakable. The institutional space occupied by the Queen Consort begins to contract, while the space occupied by Catherine expands to fill the vacuum. King Charles, navigating the delicate terrain between his wife's concerns and his sister's institutional vision, makes a series of decisions that effectively tip the balance in Catherine's direction. He approves the Crown Commission without further consultation with Camilla. He attends preliminary design briefings, suggesting royal interest and approval. He makes public statements about the importance of recognizing service and evolving institutional practices, remarks that observers understand as implicit endorsement of Catherine's elevation. One particularly significant moment occurs during a private meeting with William and Catherine at Sandringham in mid-March. According to sources present, Charles tells his son and daughter-in-law, "The crown your wife will wear will represent not dominion, but devotion. That is precisely what the monarchy requires in this era." The statement is brief but carries institutional weight. It represents the reigning monarch explicitly positioning Catherine as the embodiment of the monarchy's future values. It is, in effect, a paternal blessing of the institutional transition already underway. By late March, Gerard & Company has completed preliminary design models. These are not crude sketches, but rather sophisticated prototypes incorporating actual materials and refined artistry. The pieces are presented to the royal household in a ceremony that is kept entirely confidential, but is described by those involved as deeply moving. Catherine, seeing the crown for the first time, reportedly observes it in silence for an extended period. Her response, when she finally speaks, is characteristically understated. "It is beautiful, and it reflects values I genuinely hold. That is more than I anticipated." The crown, as materialized in these prototypes, is notably different from traditional royal ceremonial pieces. The platinum latticework creates an impression of strength without heaviness. The gemstones, while undeniably valuable, are arranged in patterns that suggest meaning rather than mere opulence. The overall effect is one of refined elegance rather than imperial grandeur. Most significantly, the detachable coronet section functions precisely as Catherine envisioned. The smaller piece can be worn independently at community events, charity visits, and informal engagements, allowing the symbol to travel with the person rather than remaining locked in institutional storage. News of the completed design prototypes reaches the media in late March, triggering renewed public enthusiasm. Social media platforms overflow with commentary praising both the aesthetic achievement and the symbolic implications of the crown. Design commentators note the innovative approaches to platinum work. Historians appreciate the integration of traditional motifs with contemporary sensibilities. Members of the public simply express support for recognition of Catherine's contributions to the institution. Polling conducted in early April shows support for Catherine's crown now exceeding 90% in the United Kingdom and reaching similar levels across Commonwealth nations. The crown has transformed from institutional proposal to genuine public expectation. Yet despite this overwhelming support, the formal presentation remains postponed. The crown will not be officially unveiled until circumstances align to maximize symbolic impact. Palace strategists debate timing, a Commonwealth Day ceremony, a formal state occasion, or perhaps, as some suggest, a surprise public appearance that would reflect Catherine's preferred approach of connecting with people rather than performing ceremony. What becomes clear by April is that the Crown Commission has accomplished something far beyond its initial intention. It has not merely acknowledged Catherine's role within the institution, it has fundamentally recalibrated how the monarchy understands power, authority, and institutional relevance in contemporary society. Where traditionally the crown represented inherited dominion, Catherine's crown represents earned stewardship. Where previously royal authority derived primarily from ceremonial tradition, Catherine's authority derives from demonstrated service and public trust. The symbol, when it finally appears, will therefore carry implications that reshape institutional self-understanding for generations. Princess Anne, observing the trajectory of events she initiated, reportedly expresses satisfaction to trusted advisors. The crown was always hers. We are simply making visible what has been true in practice for years. By late April, the completed crown, no longer prototype but rather finished ceremonial object, is secured in the royal vaults, awaiting the moment when it will be formally presented to Catherine. The timing of that presentation remains strategically ambiguous, a deliberate choice designed to maximize impact and prevent premature media speculation. What is certain is that when Catherine's crown finally appears, it will not represent a beginning. It will represent the formal recognition of a transformation that has already reshaped the monarchy in ways that extend far beyond ceremonial boundaries. The institution is no longer waiting for Catherine to become its future. It is simply waiting for the symbol to catch up with the reality that has already been established through her consistent, quiet, unstoppable demonstration of what modern royal service actually means. In the end, there is no dramatic coronation ceremony, no balcony appearance, no trumpets or proclamations echoing through Westminster Abbey. There is only a woman, dressed simply in pale blue, standing in a garden at Sandringham on a spring afternoon. A crown rests upon her head. Platinum catching the light, sapphires glinting with quiet authority, the central ruby positioned exactly where her heart would be beneath the fabric. Princess Anne places it there herself. No priest, no pageantry, only the passing of recognition from one generation of devoted service to another. Catherine does not smile for cameras. She does not perform gratitude or emotion. She simply stands, steady and composed, the way she has stood through every moment of pressure, every moment of scrutiny, every moment when the institution required her to be more than she had signed up to be. The crown was always yours, Anne says quietly. Now it is simply visible. And in that moment, the monarchy transforms not into something new, but into something it had already become. An institution that recognizes that true authority is not inherited. It is earned, consistently, quietly, with grace. The king, watching from a distance, nods once and says nothing, because sometimes the most powerful statements are made in silence.